primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlines. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised.
Billions of people just living out their lives, oblivious. Choice is an illusion created between those with power and those without.
I drink your milkshake. I drink it up.
Thank you, John Larson. I receive your kind words on behalf of all of our courageous members of the House of Representatives who want the best for the American people. And what we can do that is best for them in the next 24 hours is to pass affordable, accessible health care for all Americans. The best for all Americans is to have 32 million more people to have health insurance in our country. The best for...
Piece of stinking filth.
Shh, you're sitting in Shali. This is AJ of the InfoWars. Listen to the Shaliak. This is Alex Jones of InfoWars. Listen to Shaliak on the Cold Reality News and Report.
This is the coolest thing I have ever seen.
Well, hello there.
South Korea now officially over, but the drama continued right to the very end of the games. First time in 26 years, ice hockey players from Russia earned Olympic gold, beating Germany 4-3 in a nail-biting game. That win gives Olympic athletes, been a good day for them today for Russia, a total of 17 medals. Coming up too, the UN Security Council last night unanimously voted for a 30-day ceasefire in Syria. It's a big story this to allow for urgent humanitarian assistance to reach civilians in the hardest hit parts of that country. We'll bring you a debrief on that. And Germany's leading tabloid publishes what it thought in the week was undeniable evidence of Russian meddling in the country's politics, only to realise it was an embarrassing hoax. Sunday afternoon, 25th of February here in Moscow. This is South International with me, Kevin Owen. Thanks very much for being with us today. So then, those Winter Olympics finally over. They finished just about an hour ago with a sparkling close in the last 60 minutes or so, rounded off with some stunning fireworks, as you'd expect, and the traditional handover to the next Winter Olympic Games that will be held in the Chinese capital in 2022 in Beijing. Ilya Petrenko reports from outside the Olympic venue.
Time really does fly, and I can't believe that it's already the end of Pyeongchang 2018. We've seen the closing ceremony and the nation's parade at it, and I'll tell you what, it was much warmer than the opening on February 9th, quite literally, and the fans didn't have to freeze themselves that much to see the spectacle. Something that hasn't changed, though, is the fate of the Russian athletes who weren't able to march with their national colors. There had been a glimmer of hope that they'd be allowed to do that, but earlier on Sunday, the IOC decided not to lift the suspension of Russia's National Olympic Committee after two of the OER athletes tested positive for doping. Although the IOC president has said that these two cases appear to be isolated.
These are cases of negligence, and there is no indication whatsoever for a systemic or systematic doping affair here.
The athletes who failed the tests, though, claim it could have been a result of sabotage or some sort of mistake. They say that they have never taken banned drugs on purpose to improve their performance. back to the final day of Pyeongchang 2018. I guess if you ask the Russian fans, would they rather see their national flags at the closing ceremony, or would they rather have their men's ice hockey team win gold for the first time in 26 years? Most of them would still choose the second option, and that is exactly what happened inside the Ganning Ice Hockey Arena on Sunday. The Red Machine beat Germany 4-3 in a gripping final, and then at the prize-giving ceremony, the Olympic anthem was played instead of the Russian anthem, obviously, but guess what the winners and the stadium sang then? The national anthem, of course, and that was quite a scene to watch. This was the OER's second gold at these Olympics. The first one was won by 15-year-old Alina Zagitova in the figure skating, and I'll tell you what, these Winter Olympics were really games of hope for Russia, with many more experienced star athletes having to sit out Pyeongchang 2018 at home. The OAR still won a total of 17 medals. That is, of course, by far not the best performance, but still, in these circumstances, it deserved a huge round of applause. As for the whole medal table, Norway came first with 14 gold, 14 silver, and 11 bronze, and that's, of course, a spectacular result.
Yeah, well done all there. Well, as Ilya mentioned, back to that big news today, Sunday marking that historic win for Russian hockey players. They really went out with a bang. They won gold, beating Germany in a gripping final. The decisive goal was scored in overtime in the end, so it's real nail-biting stuff. The final score, 4-3. It was the first time that in 20 years Russian players had reached the final. The last won gold in the ice hockey back in 92. That, too, incidentally, was under a neutral banner. At the time, it's because the team didn't have its own flag. It was just following the breakup of the Soviet Union. Well, here's how fans, back to the present, reacted after the historic game. Winter Olympics in South Korea then all wrapped up now, but it appears that the diplomacy is continuing. There's some good news out of there about that today. North Korea said it's ready for talks with the United States now. It was announced after the country's officials met with South Korean diplomats at those games in Pyeongchang. Not everyone happy to see the North Korean delegation, though. There were protests at a South Korean border town against the visit. Scuffles also broke out between some protesters and the police. I spoke to independent China specialist Andrew Lung. He told me about the controversy that may shadow any North Korea-US talks, however.
As far as the sanctions are concerned, of course, the United States want to trump up the sanctions and use military coercion as its vote in solving international issues. It depends on what kind of a deal the United States can strike with North Korea. The United States obviously want the North Koreans to abandon all this nuclear arsenal, abandon all its capabilities to develop nuclear weapons and long-distance delivery systems. That's something which I don't think North Korea would necessarily accept. If that deal cannot be struck, then we're back to square one, we're back to confrontation and escalation. But on the other hand, it's quite possible that some degree of agreement may be reached.
The United Nations Security Council has passed a new resolution calling for a ceasefire across war-torn Syria. It's in response to a surge in the violence in eastern Ghouta that's occupied by both rebels and terrorists, and it's just crucially outside the capital Damascus, very close to it. The truce is effectively immediate. It will last for 30 days. It's hoped it will allow time for injured civilians to be evacuated from that conflict zone that's been hellish of late, and for much-needed aid to reach other stricken regions too. A number of terror groups, however, such as Islamic State, Al-Qaeda, and the latest incarnation of al-Nusra are excluded from that agreement. That was a big concern for Moscow that went through. It did in the end. Operations against them will continue. Khaled Mopin has more now on this UN initiative.
There has been a resolution agreed on by the 15-member body that leads the United Nations regarding the situation in eastern Ghouta. This is an enclave to the east of the Syrian capital of Damascus, and it's a place that's under the control of rebels and terrorists that are working to overthrow the Syrian government. Since it has been surrounded by government forces, and the fighting there has recently intensified. And we're hearing allegations against both sides about human life being taken, about civilians being killed. We're hearing accusations from the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, which is based in the United Kingdom. They're saying that Syria, with the support of Russia, is hurting civilians and committing atrocities against civilians. We've also heard reports from the Russian Center for Reconciliation in Syria. They are pointing out that the area is essentially being used to shell civilians in Damascus. Furthermore, they're reporting that the terrorist groups in eastern Ghouta are working actively to prevent medical aid from getting to civilians, and they're using these civilians as human shields. Now, after the unanimous vote, we then heard from various countries. We heard from Nikki Haley of the United States, and she said she doesn't believe the Syrian government will actually comply with the ceasefire.
All of us on this council must do our part to press the Assad regime as hard as we can to comply. We are deeply skeptical that the regime will comply, but we supported this resolution because we must demand nothing less.
Nikki Haley, the representative of the United States, walked out before the Syrian representative could speak. Under UN rules, if a resolution pertains to you, all countries have the right to address the Security Council. We also heard from the representative of the Russian Federation. Now, he addressed the Security Council, and he emphasized that the fight against terrorism is not affected by this resolution, that internationally delegated terrorist groups, groups like al-Nusra, ISIS, that the fight against them is not restricted by this resolution, and that fight will continue. He also had some concerns about how the fight against terrorism seemed to be serving some other goals.
The aim of battling terrorism can't become a cover for solving geopolitical problems of dubious legitimacy, and that is exactly what the U.S. is doing in Syria right now. We insist that the so-called coalition end its attempts at occupation as soon as possible. It would have, among other things, a clear humanitarian effect.
Now, the resolution has been passed, so this 30-day ceasefire that was agreed on by all 15 members of the Council is going to be implemented.
Investigative journalist Rick Sterling believes the Russian amendments to the ceasefire will allow anti-terror operations to continue unimpeded then.
I think a key addition to the resolution was the inclusion of the fact that the Syrian government can continue the fight against Al-Qaeda and ISIS in East Ghouta. And I think that was the reason that it did pass unanimously with the support of Russia and the encouragement of the Syrian government. One good thing in the resolution is that it specifically affirms the fact that the territorial integrity of Syria needs to be preserved. Of course, this is very relevant because right now the United States has illegally set up air bases and is occupying territory in eastern Syria. We've got Turkish soldiers in northern Syria, so this is very important to keep reaffirming the principle of territorial integrity.
It's unclear, though, how the ceasefire will affect northern Syria's Afrin region, which has become another flashpoint in the conflict, as we've been reporting in the week. Turkey's been carrying out a military offensive against the Kurdish militia fighters there. It sees them as terrorists. In its push to dislodge the Kurdish People's Protection Units from that border area, Turkish military struck a convoy entering the city of Afrin on Thursday night. Now, Ankara says it was carrying fighters and weapons, but the Kurdish forces insist no. They say those trucks were carrying only civilians, food and medicine. They say one person was killed in what happened there. Earlier in the week, pro-Syrian government forces arrived in Afrin to help try to repel the Turkish offensive. That came after the Kurds appealed for support. The developments in the region have put the US in a difficult position too, as Jacqueline Vuger explains next.
Two of America's main partners in the region are now at each other's throats, to put it mildly. Tries to avoid taking sides in the conflict, they seem to be losing on all fronts. Turkey, a longtime ally, looks to be getting increasingly impatient with Washington's inaction. America has only dared to call for a reduction in civilian casualties in the fight, prompting a vicious response from the Turkish president.
What disappoints us most in this process is the hypocrisy and even the levity of some countries which we consider allies and have deep political and military relations with. Turkey has had enough of lies, false promises, and delaying tactics.
And on the other side, we have the Kurds, who have been essential to the U.S.-led coalition's fight against ISIL. In the absence of support from their American partners against the onslaught of Turkish forces, the Kurds have been forced to look elsewhere, and that has pushed them into accepting help from pro-government forces. This week, militias loyal to the Syrian government flooded Afrin to bolster the Kurds.
We have come to our Kurdish brothers to fight together to protect Afrin.
We are the popular force. We came so that we could help our Kurdish brothers, because we are one people.
Now that surely ruffled feathers in Washington, where the Syrian president comes only after ISIL on their list of enemies. The U.S. has tried to shift focus to an issue that puts them back in the driver's seat, battling ISIL, calling the situation in Afrin a distraction.
What is going on in Afrin is taking away from the fight against ISIS. It is a distraction, as Secretary Mattis had called it. It is certainly not helpful to have people take their eye off the ball of ISIS. We've talked about that numerous times before.
But in reality, many in the region have already recognized that ISIL is all but defeated. Despite that, the U.S.-led intervention, which is in its third year, has no end in sight. But they may be left there with no one to call a friend as they continue to alienate their allies.
Jacqueline Voodoo reporting there. Coming up, more of the week's top stories, including victims of a long-standing horrific Japanese human engineering program finally speak out. I'll tell you about that and more. Germany's biggest-selling newspaper has been tricked into publishing a fake bombshell story on Russian meddling in the country's politics. The reported bill detailed how a mysterious Russian agent and bot master called Yuri had supposedly offered his services to the head of the Social Democratic Party's youth wing, Kevin Kuhner, hoping to sabotage a coalition deal between his party and Angela Merkel's Conservatives. Here's a snippet of the pair's supposed exchange.
Dear Kevin, I'm Yuri. I'd like to talk to you about supporting your No GroKo campaign.
Thanks for your mail. Jay already told me to expect a mail from you, but just to be sure, could you name me Jay's favourite beverage, as you can certainly understand this is a delicate matter.
Mio Mate Ginger.
Dear Yuri, perfect, that's a relief. So what can you offer me?
Basically, we can offer you everything. An opinion campaign with bots against Schultz, social bots on Twitter and Facebook, or even a targeted Facebook advertising campaign.
But the whole conversation was fabricated by the German satirical magazine Titanic. The editors behind the hoax posted this triumphant photo online. It shows one of the magazine's employees posing with a transcript of the fake emails and the tabloid's subsequent article. Now, the editor of Titanic says the hoax was all too easy to concoct. It just took him a couple of hours, he said.
We at Titanic, a satirical magazine, we work with the same methods as Bild. So we knew how to think like a Bild editor. There were no rumors about Russian meddling, and we thought this cannot be. We have to make an alliance with the Bild tabloid and push a story about Russian meddling, a story that was tacky and like a spy movie, and we had a good feeling that this would work. When there's a story like that for Bild, they don't care about details. It's only interesting if the story is good, and it was a good story indeed, and it was like a good movie. I hope it will be made into a movie sometime.
The Bild newspaper has retracted the story. Once more, the head of the SPD's youth wing insists that had he really been made such an offer, of course he would have turned it down, he said.
I don't know about this group, but of course we would refuse any of these offers. We don't work with social bots. I don't have information that we've even received any offers in this area.
Funny old thing, whenever you see meddling mentioned these days, Russia's usually being linked to it somewhere, happy days or not. But it seems the United States is way ahead on that score. A former CIA director has admitted that Washington interferes in other countries' elections and domestic affairs when it's, quote, for a good cause. That came out in the week. Lord Gadsden was across the story.
No one likes a spoiler, meddlers, interferers, especially when it comes to American elections. They're holy, pure, and spoiled and unsullied. Or they were before the Russians got to them, they say. But judge not, lest ye be judged, especially when you have a fetish for getting your fingers into foreign elections.
We don't do that now, though. We don't mess around other people's elections, Jim.
Only for a very good
Can you
cause.
do that? Do a Vine video on this former CIA director.
Only for a very good cause.
Okay.
Num, 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 said the former director of the CIA. It's funny because, and when America does it, when someone else is even suspected of doing it, no. Bad. Did the Russians break the rules or do something bizarre? The answer is no, not at all, said a 30-year veteran of the CIA. Come on, the CIA wrote the book on meddling.
We've been doing this kind of thing since the CIA was created in 1947. We've used posters, pamphlets, mailers, banners, you name it. We've planted false information for our newspapers. We've used what the British call King George's cavalry, suitcases of cash.
Add to that assassinations, coups, information warfare, hacking, and that's just the stuff we know about. Mr. Johnson there helped oversee the CIA's activities. He'd know. The difference is, they say, when Russia does it, it's to destroy the world, even when their meddling has no actual impact on the elections, as even the Justice Department just admitted. When America does it, it's for the greater good, democracy, and all that. You could ask, of course, how on earth overthrowing democratically elected leaders, as the CIA has done, is helping democracy, or how selling billions of dollars worth of guns to Gulf dictators is helping democracy, but don't.
Well, the United States has been interfering in other countries' elections since the 1930s in the Caribbean and in Latin America. When I was in CIA in the 70s and 80s in Europe, I would say that the CIA and the U.S. government basically were interfering in elections, almost every election that was taking place in Europe. This was just routine, that the U.S. wanted a friendly government of a certain type and was willing to do certain things to enable that to happen.
If we're going to claim that America has the right to interfere behind the scenes in the politics of another country, it's a little hypocritical for then America to say, oh, Russian intelligence has been interfering in American elections. You don't get to have it both ways. An increasing number of victims of Japan's decades-long eugenics program have been speaking out about their experiences. It follows the discovery of a trove of government documents relating to the sterilization campaign which began following World War II. Over 25,000 people were targeted. Many of them were operated on without the consent. One of the victims shared her story with RT.
I had a hard time going through the middle school. One of the teachers took me in as a caretaker at his house. There, I was constantly abused by his wife. I never got enough food, never got paid. I never had the chance to see the official papers to back my diagnosis either. She hated me. My teacher took me for a medical check and then I was taken to hospital. He didn't explain anything. When I woke up, I was thirsty, but they told me not to drink water. That's all I remember. At home, my parents told me that I was operated on, and now I cannot have babies. My father didn't agree to the operation. He was forced to sign documents by my teacher and welfare officers.
Sounds horrendous, doesn't it? This eugenics protection law was in effect until the mid-90s from 1948. Authorities said it was introduced to preserve the purity of the Japanese race and permitted the sterilization of people with learning difficulties and hereditary diseases. But misdiagnosis was common and surgery carried out when, even according to the program, it shouldn't have been. The Japanese government still hasn't actually apologized for the practice either or paid any compensation. For a long time, the victims were told there was no evidence of what had actually happened. In more than 16,000 cases, the procedure was carried out without people's consent. Some victims were as young as 9 years old. The first lawsuit of a victim filed back in January. Questions are now being raised as to who exactly should be held legally responsible.
When I got married, my mother-in-law told me that my sister has been sterilized. After I made an information disclosure request, I found out she was only 15 when the operation took place. Genetic mental disease was the only listed reason for her sterilization. However, it's not true. When she was a 1-year-old, she became mentally handicapped because of the anesthesia treatment doctors gave her. So she didn't have a genetic condition.
The question is, who's responsible for all of this? To me, it's the government's fault. They executed the program, as well as the national legislature, which adopted the law. They need to take responsibility and make apologies as soon as possible. The doctors were also responsible, but in a way, they were used by the government.
This is RT International, often bringing you the stories you just don't see anywhere else. Don't forget to check out our website, rt.com. You can question more there. Let us know about your thoughts about any of our stories as well. Or check us out on any of the social media out there. My name's Kevin Owen. Thank you for watching this edition of The Weekly Life from Moscow.
This week on Cold Reality Radio. More on Syria, the hypocritical bullshit stance of the United States corporation war machine, few things on the Florida high school shooting. I'm going to talk about an incident that came to a head in 2010 where a Philadelphia abortion doctor was arrested and sentenced to life crimes unimaginable. The NRA defends itself after corporations pull away. Worst rated Olympics ever. NBC, $12 billion boondoggle. Feinstein snubbed. State party favors liberal challenger. Refuses to endorse longtime ass-kissing senator. Of course, the IOC upholds Russia's suspensions and ban of national flag, even at the closing ceremony. Congratulations to the Russian, or Team Russia, for winning the gold, beating Germany. That and more on today's edition of Cold Reality Radio, here on the UCY.TV broadcasting network. You know, I play a good portion of the international news because what it shows is, and of course, you know, Russia is not beyond its propaganda and different things that it needs to do to hold up its end of its corporation. You know, there are no countries. If you're still a country, then you're probably going to get bombed and destroyed, and whatever's left is going to turn into an unimaginable way of life, much like Libya, much like Afghanistan, much like so many other places around the world that have not really played the game that, you know, the monopoly game. You know, you gotta come to the global monopoly game, and you have to play. If you don't play and you start kind of doing your thing outside of that theater, then you wind up like Gaddafi, you wind up like Hussein in Iraq, you wind up, well, the same thing could have happened to Assad in Syria, where they're still having, pro Assad rallies there, trying to show the world that they still support their, I don't know if you can say elected leader, but, you know, the Assad family has been, let's say, the government or the controller of the minds of the Syrian government for, you know, quite some time. I don't know an incredible amount of details about what life was like in Syria before the so-called civil war there. That was not really a civil war. It was a regime change, an external regime change. They didn't want Assad to do what he was doing. They didn't want him to continue to be what he was there, because ultimately he didn't agree with the Greater Israel Project, he didn't agree with that. And that's the only thing you can gather from it. I mean, you can listen to a lot of other people that think they know about what's going on over there, and some do, and that's great. And I don't really spend a whole lot of time on that aspect of things. But one thing is for sure, that you really didn't hear a whole lot about unrest in these countries until Wesley Clark in 2008, kind of brought to the surface the regime change, the seven countries that regime change was going to take place in 5 years. Now it's taken a lot longer than that, but it's starting to make sense. Well, it makes a lot of sense when you listen to that, when you listen to what Clark said about these events that were going to take place, that were set forward to take place, that he got from someone at the Pentagon, and then it starts to happen. It starts to happen, and we got Iraq being turned into just worse than, I guess you could say, worse than it was before Hussein. When Hussein was there, he kind of kept forces at bay. They're the Kurds. The story about the gassing of the Kurds, were those part of the same element that were of people that were trying to oust him early on? But again, Hussein was there to create an imbalance in that region, especially with Iran, the Iraq-Iran war that took place for a number of years. But I guess the most important thing that we see here of all of these events is in Libya and in Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan. One of the main things that I think happens out of it is that the younger populations are getting displaced. Their lives are becoming just shit. And I think what happens out of that is that you weaken any kind of military force of young people. What do they do? What did America do for Korea and for Vietnam? They drafted the 18, 19, 20-year-olds, sent them over there to die. For the Gulf of Tonkin incident that even McNamara said, I think that we were attacked that day. And those that want to believe everything is on the up and up will say, yeah, we were attacked, and then we defended ourselves. But you see, that's the thing. I mean, the manipulation is so great. It is so well thought out. There's so much. I mean, anyone can create a deception that will kill and demolish and pillage any geographic territory if you have enough money, if you have enough resources, if you have control of the news, if you have control of all these resources. You can create any type of event you want to. And like we've heard in The Matrix, when it's in the beginning of the opening recording of the Cold Reality Radio, that what does Mr. Smith say? He says about power, those in power and those without. Choice is an illusion. Choice is an illusion. And they do a masterful job with the elections and so many other things to make the commoners think that they have something to do with the outcome, whether it be right or wrong. They'll get you feeling that you're on the right side, especially Fox News. They'll get you feeling like, we're a military might and we're just going to go thump everybody, no matter what. And now, Obama, 8 years of Obama, the war continued. He said he was going to do this. He wasn't going to do any of that. But what did the liberal media do? They supported it. They defended him. They gave him a get-out-of-jail-free card, if you will, because the Democrats are supposed to be anti-war. Like, whatever happened to all those liberal anti-war people? A lot of them were paid agitators. You got your women's liberation, Gloria Steinem. They're doing a program on her. She was controlled by the CIA, or the magazines and everything were controlled by the CIA. Just like the CIA meddling segments of the CIA. There's, and it's a wonderful, wonderful model. How you can get a group of people together, split them up into different groups, have one thinking that they're doing things to save everyone and to keep the motherland, the fatherland, whatever the land is, the land that doesn't belong to you and never will, basically. They do a great job in making you think that these things took place. And that George Washington, we just had President's Day, to which I say, get a fucking room with these front men for the bankers, for the union. It's all bullshit. And then it wasn't my intention to dismiss the Illuminati, blah, 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 and all that other shit that George Washington said, and all the other bullshit that Lincoln said. But here's the bottom line, is that if you're a liar and you're a piece of shit and you're a go-along to get along type of guy, like I'm sure all of these bloodline family members were, you get a monument. You get a monument that says, this is, you did great things for America. You freed the slaves. You did all this, when that was not even who he was. Right. So the point is that there is no truth out there that's going to be rolled out by anyone. And if they do tell the truth, then they're going to be annihilated in some way, shape, or form. They're not going to have a chance to speak the truth. And some people say that Martin Luther King and Malcolm X were just paid agitators, and look at us today. Look at us today with the racial divide. There's people that don't see color. There's people that just hate. There's people that will, you would look at them and listen to them and say, wow, they don't really like, they don't really like black people, or they're, you can get a not in a judgmental way from my standpoint. It's just that you see, you hear, and then you kind of say, I just don't think that they really, would like to have, any diversification or diversity in their lives. Whereas, I've met any number of people, my, nephews went to school, and they had really awesome relationships, friends relationships with black people, and it was nice to see. It was good to see. It was like, yeah, you guys, there's no us and them. It's kind of a nice thing to see. It really is, when you see that kind of integration of people that, in high school, and they meet people of different walks of life, and they become friends and they hang out, and of course they will drink together. They'll do things that teenagers do, and again, it's nice to see. A lot of the things that we've seen in the past, whether it be the shooting of King, Malcolm X's demise, where he made statements like, if you don't catch yourself, if you allow yourself to be fooled, you will be for the oppressor and against those who are being oppressed. I'm paraphrasing there, but basically what he said is, if you listen to the media, they will lie to you, and you will be pro the person or group that is hurting this other group, and you will be against those who are being. And then you see that with Gaza today. You see that with the Israel Palestine conflict today. I'm not saying that in the past there hasn't been a provocation by Palestinian side, but what I'm saying is, if you listen to a lot of these people, and even this guy Gideon Levy, who writes for I want to say Haaretz or something over there, he will say, this thing that Trump did, this moving of the embassy is just is an absolute abomination, and it's going to cause. So you can see that there's people over there that see this, that see what is being done, and even just as an example here, as the divide and conquer is what I'm saying here, is you've got Norman Finkelstein, who has written many books about this conflict and what it really means and what's really going on. And he says, just recently I think he was on Going Underground on RT, out of the UK, this Ashvin Ratansi guy. It's a good show. A lot of these shows are really, really good shows, and they talk about real issues. You don't see any of that shit here in America. You don't see anything about on American news about what Israel is doing over there, and how the people in Gaza, the Palestinians in Gaza, are absolutely, it's almost unlivable. They're drinking poison water every day. I mean, ultimately, they just want those people to die. They're allowing, they ration the food and the products and the different things that come in through that area there, the Mediterranean, I believe, gets all. And then you get this. We get this, and then you get this. I mean, this is basically what, South Africa, the apartheid in South Africa. And, of course, that kind of broke up. But that was another scheme and scam by these elite, these banking families, these interests that knew that, boy, they were going to dominate that land now. And then once the time frame and the body of that apartheid regime died out, years later, they could just stoke it up all over again by meddling and doing different things. And that's exactly what's happening over there. There's soon to be like incredible water shortage over there. I've had Mr. Rush on here from South Africa. He was kind of touring around here in America, talking about the coming genocide that was verified by Genocide Watch in Washington. Said he told this man that works in the mind controlling government, the bloodline controlled system of control of governing, told Simon that you guys are like a step and a half away from a genocide. So he and his family and other families that live there in South Africa, that no doubt have been caught up and part of the social engineering, the geographic engineering that took place years ago, that still exists today, is now, just like every other area of the world, all of these old wounds are being opened again. All of these old wounds are being opened again. Like, give you an example. In, what was that movie? Hotel Rwanda, where the one tribe in a short period of time killed like 1 million of this other tribe because, and they weren't even there's animosity, but I don't even think that this other tribe was planning to. They were just protecting and planning, because in their mind the seed of divide and conquer was planted years ago. So these leaders or these misleaders that get into these areas of Africa go in there, and then they say, these people over here are going to try and kill you. These people over here, they're planning to kill you and your families, blah, 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 blah. And then what happened? Boom, next thing you know, 1 million people dead. Hotel Rwanda. Now, I don't know if the movie, I saw the movie, but I don't know if the movie really brought to, if it had any of the Hollywood control over it, whether you actually got the real story or the truth about that. But the bottom line here is that we are horrifically manipulated by this hidden hand. And then when you say that, it's like, oh, there's not people. That people will constantly say that it is not whoever these people are that you say are controlling world conflicts, everything that's wrong around the world. They will say to me, people are not that competent to be able to do this. So they look at themselves, I imagine, and see how incompetent they are and how they've not been able to do this, or whatever example in their mind they think that this is not possible for a government to get together and create a terrorist attack and then monetarily and systematically move forward with a plan that was set years in advance to be able to continue to do what has been done because of that event. They just cannot believe that something like that could take place, and a horrific event could take place, they just believe the story. They'd rather believe that incompetence was the key, and that's why that event happened. And so when you have that type of childlike mindset, playground type mentality, thumbsucker fucking stance on the world as a whole, you really won't allow yourself to go there, because we're not home of the brave, okay? We're not free, and we're not home of the brave. And they love to get you wrapped in they love to wrap the Bible in a flag and beat you over the head with it. And they do it. They've done it consistently. And that is what causes, largely what causes this absolute disconnect from reality. We live in a thumbsucker nation with thumbsuckers and incompetence, commoner incompetence. And as always, there's a group of people that can think outside the box, can really think outside of the programming, and tries to do good things and tries to bring to the forefront what the real reason for this is, what the real reason is for that, who's really truly behind it, what is the motive, and it's always money. People always think, oh, it's money, 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 because that's what motivates them. So incompetence, and they just wanted money. So we break it down, and that's all it's really about for these people. They can't think outside of their own incompetence and their own lust for money, and so that must be why 9/11 happened, or that must be why this happened, or that must be that because people are incompetent. And the people, you better start getting smart. You better start eating your fucking Smarties or whatever, because. And I honestly, I really don't think people are capable. They're really just not capable. Spectators, largely. Spectators that just sit back and, entertain me, that type of thing. And it just really kind of blows me away. So not only do we have a system of traitors and just garbage trash people that take money and take roles of titles, impressive titles, like Nikki Haley, who has no idea how the way the world fucking works. All she knows is, was she the governor down there in South Carolina, North Carolina or something? And now she works for the Trump organization, and she's in there, and they're like, go in there and tell everybody that Iran is the worst place ever and it needs to be blown up and destroyed. And that their people, then within the last 3 to 6 months, there was an uprising in Iran, an uprising inside there, where people started, and then people started getting hurt. They're out there. They're not grassroots. They're AstroTurf. So they go in there. They get paid to create chaos, and then the Western media says, "Oh, look, these people don't like the way that Iran's running their government, and we're going to be watching you now. If you harm anybody, we're gonna stand up, even though they're fucking harming people in this country, they're harming people in other countries." And just like Malcolm X said, if you don't watch yourself, if you're a dumbass, you're gonna be loving those who are torturing and killing and maiming and pillaging and raping, and you're going to be hating those that are being pillaged and raped and slaughtered, and you're going to say it's their fault. They brought it on themselves. So if he was legit, he was spot on. He knew. And if he was legit, that's why they took him out. And then, of course, you've got your John Lennon, who spoke out and said, these people are psychopaths. These people these wars, all this stuff, these people are just, one thing led to another, and then boom. And then you find out that the shooter had ties to people in government, just like Hinckley, where there were ties to the Bush family. I believe Hinckley had ties to the Bush family. Somewhere in there. So we are completely socially engineered in every facet, every way, shape, or form, from women's liberation to divide the family, to get the children, to get the mother out into the workforce, to get more tax dollars, to be able to use those tax dollars to bomb and kill and rape and pillage and maim and slaughter. I'm going to give you an example of a documentary that I saw last night, happened right in the city of Philadelphia. In 2010, it had been going on for years, but boom, what do we see? I don't even remember the story. And this is, all right, well, it was 2011 when I started really kind of, late 2011 when I started podcasting and talking about things. But I knew of, since 2004, 2005, listening to Melonhead Jones and hearing about the things that were going on in the world. But of course, with Alex Jones's shit sandwich, builds the sandwich. How do you want this sandwich? Oh, it's a real interesting sandwich. A lot of people died so that you could get this sandwich. But I'm going to make this sandwich for you. It's a reality sandwich. It's a knowledge sandwich. It's all these things built into this meal that I'm going to make for you. And then when he says, look over there. Oh my God, I can't believe that. And he slips a turd into the sandwich because he doesn't address the elephant in the room. Largely, it's just the globalist. It's just this. It's just that. He doesn't point out that he's part of this extended family, that his family is part of these extended families. He is, if you believe in an Illuminati or a group of people that is steering the world in their direction, or minions of these organizations, the Masons, the Club of Rome, Masons, Bilderberg, just all of these organizations that you're the Rosicrucians, all these different groups of people, these secret societies. If you believe that, okay, Jones is wrapped up in there. He is extended. And my point being, if there is an Illuminati, and you've got your guy that wrote the bloodlines of the Illuminati, which I've met a couple times at different events going around, just trying to find out just more about what's going on in the world that I live in, instead of just being a useless bag of shit American. If you believe that then Jones is he is of the bloodlines of the Illuminati. Like so many of these actors and actresses in Hollywood, whether it be Warren Beatty or Brad Pitt or Tom Hanks or Madonna or all these people, they are there because they are part of these extended families. That's what this whole world is created. Those are the ones that get the spoils. They are the ones that get the goods. And there are others that get nothing, even though they're probably 10 times the musician that Madonna is, or 10 times the actor or whatever, or actress that these others are. So they get the spoils. We spoke about this a lot with Clint. I want to thank Clint for getting back on the air and doing a couple, 2-3 months of podcast here. He's actually, last week was the last one, but any kind of communication to the proletariat from Clint regarding his research and Patrick Jordan's research is just priceless in any form whatsoever. And I want to thank him for kind of opening up his writing schedule and all these other different things that he was talking about that he needs to do, and I back him 100%. And it was just good to have him back on the air, just solidifying even more the core details about how this fictional system has deceived us and continues to deceive us to this day. So, again, thanks to Clint for spending his Sundays over the last 3 or 4 months to give us some more data to, again, re-establish his work and his research, which is, again, priceless information. So, again, people don't want to believe that at the core of our lives in this fictional creation called the United States of America, and of course Japan now, because you heard about the eugenics in that report there where they were just taking people. I mean, this is a concerted effort, continuity of agenda. When you find that it's happening in Japan, that it's happening in Africa, that it's happening in all these places. This is a concerted effort to kill and destroy life. End of. This is no bullshit. Okay? They are killing babies. I'm going to tell you a story. Maybe I can find something here on YouTube that'll kind of break it down a little bit before I start. But there was a man by the name of Kermit Gosnell who had his practice, they call it practice, all these practicing medicine, not mastering medicine, but practicing. And this happened They called it the Kermit Gosnell House of Horrors. This, what was this? 3801 Lancaster. I'll give you a little bit of, this was 5 years ago. Let's see here. Let me do a little brief. Okay, here's one. Just give you a little bit of a...
The search was a culmination of an investigation into a massive, illegal drug-selling operation involving prescriptions for OxyContin and other narcotics.
The FBI and the DEA led the raid on February 18, 2010.
They thought that they would just find a normal clinic that allowed this doctor to make so much money and for so many people to get illegal prescriptions for narcotics. What they discovered was a horrific, it's almost out of one of the worst movies or horror novels that you can imagine.
Officials from the Pennsylvania Department of Health and Department of State came along.
And they knew about it for years. Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, the capital of the state, knew about this for years, and they covered it up.
To the grand jury report, it was their first visit to the clinic in more than 15 years.
Instead of just seeing pills, they saw blood. Blood-stained walls, urine on the walls, feces, infestation.
Okay, so that was just a little bit there. This man, Kermit Gosnell, and if you have Prime Video, which is from Amazon, you can see there's actually a lot of documentaries on there that you would not expect to see on there. Documentaries about injecting aluminum. People are injected with aluminum in a lot of these vaccinations, immunizations. Aluminum is just one part of this deadly population reduction agenda. Let me get another short one here. Let's see if I can get it. And here's the thing. I don't even remember hearing about this fucking thing. I don't even remember hearing about it or anyone even talking about it. And I'm going through and I'm flipping through these documentaries, and there I see 3801 Lancaster, which is West Philadelphia. Now I lived in an area over there called Lower Merion, which is right there on the city line where Montgomery County and Philadelphia are separated by one road. And not too far from there, 5 minutes or 10 minutes, was this location in West Philadelphia where all these things were going on. And I want to get a little bit more. Of course, CNN reporting on it, which is weird. I guess they couldn't control the narrative. But the thing about this guy is that everybody was like, oh my God, he is the nicest man. Came from they had family members on there. A lot of the people looked like him. In family. And they were like, I cannot even believe that this is happening. I cannot even believe that this is happening.
This next story comes with us.
Here's a young woman who cannot have children now after this. She can't have children because and you hear this a lot, okay? Women that were turned away because they were past the point where a legal abortion could be done were sent to this guy. And he had other people working for him, another doctor, some guy named Carmen or something like that. And again, the reason for them, Harrisburg, turning away from inspecting this abortion clinic and others was because they knew that they would not pass the inspection. They knew it, that it would not pass the inspection. But ultimately, at the core, I truly believe that they wanted this stuff there are elements, and there was one guy that and then they didn't even say the name, they said, but they could not find who approved that these places would not ever in 15 years be inspected, because they knew that they would be shut down. And then there was any number of times when people had reported him and reported different things, other doctors, different elements of things that you would imagine would happen, and it still continued. Let's take a listen here.
Strong word of caution. The details are gruesome. You won't want young children to watch.
He had a good reputation. I mean, people liked him. And they actually believed that he was offering a service that poor women could not afford anyplace else. So how it went so wrong is anybody's guess.
From everything I've heard before this, he was a well-respected physician in West Philadelphia. He was successful. This was not a back alley operation. He was on one of the most prominent highways through that portion of the city. And
they had frozen babies that were almost full-size infants, somewhere around 6-7 months. And they would supposedly use some kind of chemical, some kind of injection that would kill this baby, which is horrific enough. But they had scissors, and what they would do is they would cut a vertebrae. They showed the incision in the back of the baby's neck where they cut the fucking vertebrae and killed this kid and all these kids. And this guy, who everybody admired and fucking loved and said he always had a smile on his face and he always had a joke to tell and he was respected, this guy was murdering people and women in this clinic that was approved by Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. And I never even fucking heard this story. I want to say there was just a little click when I heard the name, but it was nowhere enough. And that, again, is probably the programming that keeps people from not paying attention to something this fucking horrific. They had feet that were cut off and put in tiny jars. They were giving abortions to women who were, and here's some of the things that they said when they got in there and they realized that they were like, I don't want to do this. And you can understand. I mean, I don't, you know what I mean? I can't say that I fully understand because I'm never going to be pregnant. But these women that go in there, that they're scared, their lives are about to change in one way or another because they have to bring another life into the world. And the way the world has been designed, the way the world has been designed by this fiction, abortion always comes into play. It always comes into during all these things. You got the Republicans, right? They're like, hey, we want your child to be born. That way he can fight in future wars. Okay? All right? And I'm sure that there's other conservative people out there that, have their children, love their children, and would never want to see something like this happen. But then there is that element of people that if they're born, they can be a part of a war machine at some point down the line. And then, of course, you've got the Democrats who just absolutely are back any kind of abortion, no matter what it is, no matter late term, whatever. And this guy was there doing it. And the fucking spooky thing is that this guy was like some kind of sociopath who in the front, on the book cover, he was this wonderful man that could have gone to Washington, that could have gone to any one of these other cities and been much, much more than what he was here. But this is what he decided to do. And during this documentary, a man calls him up while he's in prison, or they're communicating, doing a phone interview. And then you can't even believe that this guy, it's almost as if he didn't know what he was doing, or somewhere along the line he said something about these kids are ultimately going to go and they're going to be in jail, they're going to be this is going to happen, horrible things are going to happen to this child. So, and he didn't say this, but I guess he figured if he would extinguish the life now, that type of thing would not happen. So let me play a little bit more of this.
And he provided a service that a lot of people used.
There was a whole system failure, and people have died. People have died who should not have died.
It was not a system failure. It was not a system failure. Just like this shooting, the security guard who didn't go into the school. I'm not saying that these things didn't happen in any way, shape, or form, but something fucked up happened that day. This kid should have never, ever been able to get into that school. I mean, it's just any number of these different reports about how fucking crazy this guy was were taken seriously. This would not have happened. But now they want to blame it on the weapon. They want to blame it on the weapon.
And we've allowed a man to continue to butcher babies, butcher women, and nobody did a damn thing about it.
Check 1 2, check 1 2.
So, of course, the hearing was in Harrisburg, where all of this gets
Good morning.
covered
This
up.
informational hearing will now come to order. I thank all of you for coming. I'm Senator Pat Vance, the Majority Chairman of the Senate Public Health and Welfare Committee. Today's is an informational hearing, and it will provide a good opportunity to gather more details about the conditions that existed inside the Gosnell Women's Medical Society clinic and the action taken by those involved.
On February the 18th of 2010, as a result of an ongoing investigation, we were executing a search warrant at the office of Dr. Kermit Gosnell, which is located in 38th and Lancaster Avenue, the neighborhood of Philadelphia known as Mantua.
Well, it's no surprise Philadelphia has a drug problem, trafficking, not just in street drugs, but there's always been a problem with trafficking in pharmaceuticals.
That's every city in America.
And initially, this investigation, from what the federal grand jury report has said, began as an investigation of somebody who was putting out prescription drugs, oxycodone, other drugs, into the West Philadelphia community.
What they discovered, it's almost out of one of the worst movies or horror novels that you could imagine. It was blood-stained walls, blood-stained beds, and unclean sheets. They found jar after jar after jar filled with fetal remains, and specifically severed feet in jars. They found medical waste bags just strewn everywhere. What they learned was that he was running an abortion clinic, for the most part, a late-term abortion clinic.
I mean, there have been plenty of horrors that have been uncovered in Philadelphia and elsewhere, but I think this case itself is almost unprecedented.
I had started hanging around with like the wrong crowd around that time period, and I had got raped and I got pregnant. And someone told me about this clinic at 3001 Extra Avenue.
When I found out I was pregnant, I did not even know what like morning sickness was. I knew who I was pregnant by, and he was gone. He was in town and out of town. He was gone back to Jamaica, and it threw me for a loop. So I felt like, what do I do? You know, and here's my career. I'm not ready for this. So what do I do? That's how I felt. Like I was at a loss.
It was always packed, coming and going. I think everybody knew abortions were going on. You couldn't help it because every Saturday morning the priests and the anti-abortionists were out front praying the rosary.
He called the police on me, and I was moved from here to across there, and I stood across there with a bullhorn telling people what their baby looked like at this time, and sending them to the birthright and different other places that could give them help. And if I could just save one a day, that was good for me.
I remember it like it was yesterday. It was a fish tank in the waiting area, and then you had a receptionist that just like all she wanted was your money immediately.
I've seen people walking in and out all the time. I mean, and walking out, and you know, and half of the girls falling on the ground, you know, all drugged up, you know, and after getting procedures done, and just seen some weird stuff going on in there. But I didn't know he was what he was doing, you know, with the killings and all.
I came in, and they finally called my name, and I went upstairs. And I remember just walking through and looking, and I seen some women that looked half dead in these bloody recliner chairs. There was blood all over the floor, and I just kept going.
I'm sorry. So just imagine the mindset of this young woman, justifiably torn between, especially in her case, and then walking into that place, and then going to there were 3 levels in it. And when she walked in there, she saw women that were, well, as she described, half dead, and that there was blood everywhere. I mean, later, man. I mean, I can't even imagine why she would not have, again, the mindset, the the inability to be able to make the proper choice because of the circumstances.
Dr. Gosnell had a process that he referred to as snipping. Women would come, specific medicines would be given that would induce labor.
I didn't see him until I was hooked up with IVs, and when they put the heart monitor around me, that's when I decided I can't do this.
They would then take scissors and place them at the base of the skull and snip or sever the spinal cord of those children that were born alive.
Pictures of dead babies.
There was one
almost
baby
full size
that when it was born, one of the workers was playing with it for several minutes before the worker did exactly what Dr. Gosnell did, snipped the back of the neck. And when we use the word snip, it is a scissors taking a bony part of a vertebrae and cutting it. This is a very, very painful thing. And some of these babies did not die immediately. And they describe their bodies twitching and lifeless.
Imagine.
I just get this, I can't do it. And
can you fucking imagine?
He's like, oh, stop being a little baby, and he's pounding on my leg. Stop
this
being
is
a little
Gosnell.
baby. Stop being a little baby. And now I'm outnumbered because all these women come in, and I'm like tied to the bed. And next thing I knew, I was out of it.
You fucking imagine. I cannot even believe that we have gotten to this place in society.
It went so fast, and so that's away. So when I got pregnant again, I went to the clinic and I asked them, I said, is it okay that I get, another abortion? Fine. They even had this woman sit down with me, and she told me that women in Brazil have at least 21 abortions. And she was like, and they're still able to conceive, and, and that was it for me. That was where I basically said, you know what, this has to be okay. It was the norm for me after she had coached me into believing that was the norm. I would say the next 14 years, within that time, I had 8 abortions. 8. And I look back at it, and it's like, God, what was I thinking?
It's dark face. She doesn't even want you to know who she is.
I woke up, and I was sitting next to another girl. And at first, when I woke up, I thought I was I didn't know where I was. I just knew I was really groggy, and I knew I wasn't pregnant anymore. And I was crying, and I kept saying, I want my baby, I want my baby. And they just were ignoring me.
But they made it seem like it was so okay. It was just so okay to just go in there and get it done, as long as you had the money.
I don't know specifically how much he was charging. That goes into some detail in the grand jury report. But certainly the prosecution in Philadelphia, the prosecutors contend that it made him a millionaire.
$10,000 to $15,000 a day performing them. 8 counts of murder he was charged with. 7 babies born alive, and 1 woman died as a result of botched abortion at his clinic, died of sepsis.
The adult victim, prosecutors say, was 41-year-old Karnamaya Monger, who died in 2009 after receiving an overdose of anesthesia. The nearly 300-page investigative report says paramedics who arrived at the clinic found her lifeless and said Gosnell was just standing there, not doing anything.
In this woman's death, one of his office workers began the anesthesia process. Not a nurse, not a professional anesthesiologist, but just an employee of the clinic who had begun working with the doctor and sort of got on-the-job training. The problem was that, when you have, especially with anesthesia, when you have somebody who has been given too much, you don't have a very big margin of error to try to save someone's life.
The grand jury, in addition to reporting their findings of the horrific and barbaric treatment of women and young girls, they were very upset and angered by what they thought was a disparate treatment, that the treatment of these patients was, in their mind, only allowed due to the fact that the supermajority of the patients were poor, that they were minorities, that they were brown and black women.
%70 of all abortion facilities are located in the black and minority communities around this country.
Abortion is the #1 killer of African Americans, killing more black people than all other deaths combined.
50%. Dr. Gosnell even had a separate room in his clinic for the young white women that would come, that was slightly less squalid than the rest of the clinic. When asked by his staff why this was, he said, well, that's the way of the world. It would be more likely for those women to report what had happened and what they saw at the clinic.
Everything that was ever gained during the civil rights movement means nothing to a dead black child.
We are here in defense of the defenseless, of those who cannot speak out for themselves.
There is an effect of abortion on our community. That effect has an impact on our demography. It has an impact on our survival. It has an impact on the health of our community and certainly on the health of our families.
I think there are many of us who have forgotten what the dream was all about.
Yeah.
Civil rights are still being violated.
Yes.
Even today, how many black people continue to look the other way while black babies are being slaughtered by abortionists? How can we continue to smile, slapping each other on the back, proud of our accomplishments, when abortion facilities are purposefully placed in inner cities and minority neighborhoods to crush the bodies of innocent black children? Make no mistake, abortion is a civil rights issue.
All right, and you can see more. The name of this clip is 3801 Lancaster, Lancaster. It's Lancaster Avenue there. I've probably driven past that from where I used to live to be able to get down to the airport area. I probably passed that very spot 100 or more times. And they are right. They're right. This is again, I don't even know if they'll allow themselves to go. I think they're just thinking, that they're just killing, black people. Yes, there are more being killed. More black children being killed like this. There was also a couple white women in the documentary as well. And some of these were not in the actual documentary, the one that's on. But you can gather just as much. You don't even necessarily need to watch that, but there's some 45-minute clips in here that will kind of show you exactly what that does, and even go into it in more detail. But this guy, when he was being interviewed on the phone, he absolutely, this is what he did. It's like, if you go to the store and you work at a convenience store and you run a register all day long, that's what you do. This guy became incredibly wealthy, doing something. Somewhere along the line, somebody came to him and said, listen, this needs to be done. And then, again, he justified it by saying these kids are going to, they're not going to have good lives. They're going to wind up in prison. They're going to wind up on the street or whatever. So his life experience, seeing that, he apparently thought that he was doing society a favor. And you just can't even imagine that. Yeah, but this is much bigger. It's much bigger. Don't want to lose a focus on the fact that they are murder. He is only but one of hundreds of his kind that are doing this as well. And then even at the end of the documentary, there was a Planned Parenthood that probably about 35 miles in Delaware, Wilmington, Delaware, that was shut down because they were practicing these types of abortions. Now, here's the deal. You do whatever it is that you think that you have to do. You can see how this woman and the other woman and the people that were in that facility, and now they can't have children because they believed bullshit lies from people. How it's affected their lives. So they're suffering because of the decisions that they made. But when you see a society now where women are saying, you're trying to control me, you're trying to tell me what to do with my body, this, that, and the other thing, it is a systemic brainwashing that has taken place over years and years and years. That, and I mean, when you talk about these, when it gets to the point where it's past the point of when it can legally be done, and then this guy Gosnell was doing this, saying that life does not begin until the child takes its first breath, things like that. So the guy that was interviewing him was very non-judgmental. He was just asking questions. He knew that the questions that he asked were, whatever the answer was, people were going to get down to the bottom of why this took place for themselves. They would make their own decisions. But I mean, I just couldn't even believe it. And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, what in the world? This happens right in the city of Philadelphia. And I don't even remember it largely because a lot of these things don't get covered the way that they really would. Okay? So we're talking $10,000 to $15,000 a day that he made. Okay, so if he was charging like $200 or $300, all right, so we're talking, say it was $250. $40, $50 a day, maybe. And he's somewhere in between 30 and 40 or 50 of these types of abortions a day. And that is somehow acceptable. And you compare that to the shooting. You compare that to the school shooting. And I'm sure that you get a person in the right mindset would attack me for even comparing that to the school shooting. But how is it different? How is it different? Because it's not a life, or nobody knows what this child is going to, who this child would have been? It's really, really just unbelievable. But it is, again, part of the denial of the commoners that live inside this fiction. There is a depopulation agenda, and largely it starts with the abortion clinics.
There is only one holistic system of systems.
I will MK Ultra ya, put the MK scope on ya. If the MK hits you, it's guaranteed to open ya. The 57mm Mark 110, 220 rounds a minute, try to stop them. Don't put that on your wish list, that's retarded babble. Protesters make the hit list soon as they start to rabble. For you're nothing but fishes in the barrel. It doesn't have to be Christmas for a carol. Some decorate with ornamental decorum, some perform shock and awe on Hanukkah and Purim. That's where my job come in. I am a blessing to the mercenary for the corporation selling weapons to them. Any potential competitor step into them. I'm authorized to knock them out and stick a GPS into them. They want to sell uranium to Iran that's enriched at